There is no bigger boffin on television than Liam Halligan when it comes to interest rates. Liam, this idea, will the Bank of England now not touch rates during a campaign?
I think Ben's right. It's very difficult for the Bank of England to make an interest rate cut that will be seen to be so political on June the 20th. That's when the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting is. And guess what? In July, there is no Monetary Policy Committee meeting. They only meet 8 months a year. So the first interest rate cut you could have had, given that inflation today was 2.3%, still above target, core inflation above 3%, the first interest rate cut was going to be August. And I guess the whole Tory strategy, to the extent which they had a strategy, was to wait and wait and wait for the Bank of England to do 2, maybe 3 interest rate cuts before November. The Tory kind of, fantasy pre-election series of events was that they'd have another budget autumn statement in September where they'd do another cut to national insurance so they could get national insurance down to 8% all the way from 12%. It went from 8, 12 to 10, of course. And then they could say, we've given working families a big tax cut on national insurance. They seem to now have abandoned that. I think Matthew described the inflation number today as not too bad. It's actually... You're right, but actually really disappointing. Financial markets thought it was going to be 1.9.
It was down by a whole percentage.
Yeah, it was down from 3.2 to 2.3. But given that the Ofgem energy price cap came down this last month in April, given that there were all kinds of what we call base effects, boffin speak, alert, just bear with me. A lot of economists thought we'd hit the 2% target or even go 1.9. Then we could have had an interest rate cut in June. Now we're not going to get one.
Is not within the control of the government. How much of this is to do with what's going on in America, where, of course, inflation has taken off again? I mean, the Prime Minister's right when he says that inflation now in the UK is lower than in the Eurozone, it's lower than in the United States, it's lower than in these competitor economies.
It is. It's 2.3 in the UK, it's 2.4% in the Eurozone, and it's 3.4% in America. As you rightly say, Tom, inflation in the US has actually gone up. So the Federal Reserve is going to delay its interest rate cut. The next move in interest rates in the Fed in the US could even be up.
Wow.
Believe it or not. That's what some of the weight of money in the markets is suggesting. And all the time, looking over this interest rate landscape like a kind of spectre is geopolitics. Is the Middle East really going to go full Tonto? Is Russia-Ukraine going to blow up again? What's that going to do to oil prices? Could there be a spike? So I guess this whole let's wait for the economy to get better, then we may get some kind of feel-good factor, which the Tories have been clinging on to for months. They abandoned that today. I must say, I think they abandoned it in a hurry. I do think today's press conference was atrociously managed. It wasn't just the weather, but it was also the weather. It's Britain, it's the spring, it rains, have an umbrella ready.
Doesn't make you sort of have that feel-good factor about Britain.
Absolutely.
Although, July the 4th, one day before the quarter-finals of the Euros, might there be this there's a much fabled effect in 1966 of that general election where Harold Wilson won either just
we
before
only win the World Cup under Labour, right?
Absolutely. And Eurovision. Well, could there be a Euros effect? Could the Prime Minister be thinking, hang on, actually, by July the 4th, we're going to be seeing the sun coming out. People are going to be feeling happier. There's going to be a big football competition and, let's say, England,
and there'll be a boost
of the country will get through quite far, and there'll just be this sense of optimism. That's, I suppose, what he's banking on.
Well, I guess it depends how the team plays.
We'll know out in the first round. But remember Scotland are there as well. Knowing Rishi Sunak's luck, he could well be out in the first round.
There's a serious point in what you make, Tom. As you know, when you have these big sports festivals, people go out and spend, people have barbecues, people go and do some quick DIY because the relatives are coming round and all the rest of it. You do get a bit of a sugar rush in the economy, but it's not sustainable. And look, a big problem here is that Labour may get into the realms of over-promising and under-delivering. They are going to be taking on an inheritance that is nothing like 1997. I've talked a lot about a comparison between Labour's front bench before 97, many of whom I knew well. I was a young reporter on the FT. It was my job to really get to know them, compared to the front bench now, which, with all respect to Matthew's party, that it's not nearly as impressive as 1997. And also, the economic inheritance is far less benign.
What Labour would say to that, and Matthew, do come in on this, would be that you've got people like Yvette Cooper who've actually been in government before. In 1997, I don't think there was a single shadow cabinet minister who then became cabinet who had been in government before. There were 18 years.
There have been junior ministers before, Jack Cunningham and one or two others. Nobody had a senior level.
That's what happens when you've been out of power for over a decade, right?
Yeah.
There are a few. There are a few. It's all about the fiscal situation, though. I mean, Rachel Reeves rightly is not over-promising because the inheritance they're going to get, taxation at a 70-year high, huge public sector debt, 100% of GDP rather than 30% of GDP.
And what you saw
which
this
Brown
week
inherited.
was you saw in the pledge launch a few days ago that Keir did. You saw he was absolutely clear he was not going to commit to tax cuts from that 70-year high. So that's giving him a little bit of wiggle room, at least once he gets in, by just not promising tax cuts, by being. And I think you're going to hear a lot from Labour. We're going to inherit a complete disaster, national emergency, which is of course not the situation in '97 when things were getting better, even before they got better under Tony Blair.
D-Ream earworms song. My God,
things can only get better.